Hello and good afternoon. I am Sam Thompson, Senior Managing Director at Progress Partners, and I'm happy to welcome to this week's panel, Creating Enterprise Value. This is the first panel of our second Progress Connect webinar series titled Business Growth Hacking. We've taken great pleasure in hosting our first series, Rethinking Business in a COVID World, and now see a great opportunity to bring the discussion to a forward-looking stance. This week's webinar is co-hosted by Progress Partners and our partners at OC&C, a global strategy consulting firm with a robust business in the media and entertainment landscape. I will kick off this session momentarily with some progress insights, followed by Sebastian Blum with some insights from OC&C. Then our esteemed executive in residence and moderator for this panel, Marianne Halford, will introduce our panelists and bring some great firsthand perspective on creating enterprise value. We do have our upcoming webinar schedule. This is our second series, dating all the way through to June 25th, which will be announced, but we hope you all can tune in for each of those sessions in addition to today. And let's kick off with some insights. So, creating enterprise value. Progress Partners as a boutique investment bank doing a lot of work in the media and entertainment world, but across all forms of technology and digital media, see a lot in both the sell side and buy side of the market. And thought it would be good to kick off today's sessions just to think a little bit about the motivations behind corporate development and the acquisitions that are made in our regular course of business. So in large part, and under normal circumstances, most M&A deals fall into at least one of these three buckets. Geography, as in geographical expansion, customer expansion, and product expansion. You know, businesses capitalize on innovation. They could shield themselves from disruption or displacement and improve productivity and reach into a given market. Increasing ACV or annual contract value by adding a product, making sure that they can be properly positioned to hold on to a particular position in that market from a customer standpoint, and so forth. Following on to my next slide, we go into a few case studies of recent deals that we've been involved with to exemplify some of these moves. Here in the case of a sell-side transaction we're involved with between LBN and Ansira, Local Business Now was acquired very specifically to add to its local search capabilities and add the automotive customer base. Here you have a great example of a business in Ansira that needed the additional product and customer reach to grow their business. Moving into another case study, we have Pandora, who acquired AdsWiz. As many of you are aware, Pandora, leading global music streaming service, acquired AdsWiz really for its digital audio infrastructure and advertising solutions in order to build a better ad monetization strategy. They also had a global reach given its European base and brought in both product and consumer growth for the company. Moving into another case study here, we have Dazzle acquired by Comcast. Comcast platforms, specifically the Strata Group, now known as Freewheel Advertisers, acquired Dazzle to expand its suite of digital solutions with immediate global scale. Comcast, largely US focused, brought in a different strategy here where they were looking at geography in particular, and then product. In my final case study, we look at a US centric business in Raycom Media that acquired Pure Cars to accelerate and sustain their growth to compete in the digital age. Raycom Media, a large television broadcaster, had very little reach in the digital world, and it worked with us to expand their reach into both dealerships, but also through a product base of software and ad targeting technology to improve their offering to those dealerships. Customers were also brought in through that acquisition. So in all of these cases, and as I said before, in normal circumstances, these are different ways that these businesses have thought about creating business value. Of course, in a unique situation like COVID has presented, and in situations leading up to any of these transactions, strategy plays a key role to help these companies determine and drive each of these decisions, whether it's product, its geography, or its customer. So I'm going to hand off the presentation now to my partner and colleague Sebastian Blum to go over how OC&C works with their customers to think through all the decisions on how a business can create value, not just through acquisition, but prior to getting to acquisition, and what might help define the types of acquisitions that can punctuate a great growth strategy.
Yes, thank you, Sam. So I'll move through 6 slides at pace. So this just should give you an overview of how we kind of look at value creation more broadly. In the time of a crisis and a market downturn, there's of course quite some appetite there to think about how to set up firms, how to clean house, maybe out of necessity, but also to set it up to basically accelerate out of the market downturn. Now, what we see often that there's a broad range of ways people go about this, and oftentimes they start with value creation levers that you see as a step 3 here. So for us, there's 2 steps before that. There's a clear and crystal clear understanding of the strategy that is required, not only a vision, but really a view on where this company should be coming out of the crisis, because that is required to kind of set the capability agenda. What are the things you need to do really well in the end to deliver that strategy? And that is really the 2 steps that we kind of take a bit of time to typically to think about. Basically, as I said before, the strategy kind of leads to the 3 or 5 things, few things you need to do really well, which are cross-silo, cross-functional. In media companies, you would see things like you need to do digital video really well. You need to do social commerce really well. To do that well, you kind of need like systems, people, and a broad range of things. So it's not only a function or a silo. The ubiquitous capabilities are the things that people would point out to you they need to do well, but maybe they don't, because maybe they don't pay off. Maybe everyone in the industry has those, and a lot of companies are under a misapprehension of that this is what will make them successful in the future, but all it serves to at the end is a loss of focus and an overpayment on these things. And then there's the basic capabilities you want to have as lean as possible. So we take a lot of time to to understand the cost structure and what it will take to drive growth going forward. Now, the value creation levers then would be applied in line with that capability agenda that you defined in the beginning. And they are actually different from industry to industry. We see a lot of firms applying generic value levers, kind of economically driven. We believe that the more you get to the front office, the more different those actually are. Very different to restructure and change an ad sales organization in media, let's say, than to do churn management in a telco or in something else in a retailer. Now, as further you go to the back office, the more generic these levers become. Shared services, spans and layers, and other things would be more cross-industry. The key thing here is that M&A is one of these levers, but you have to kind of know what capability agenda to apply it again. Now, these are all the value levers you can apply. You don't apply all of them. You apply like the top 4 or 5 that come out of your diagnostic, which actually move the needle per company. And you see they are kind of distributed between very specific ones and more generic ones. And whether or not you are driving for more revenue increase, which may be revenue expansion of the core or new revenues, or sales acceleration, or if you drive more towards cost levers, whether that's spans and layers or shared services or offshoring, that's up to the individual project. Some people need to take out costs, other people need to kind of set it up more for growth. These value levers have both effects and certainly spike in one area versus the other. Now, what this leads to at the end of the day is that you limit the overspending that you have in ubiquitous capabilities that don't really pay off if you do it much better than you are doing it right now. It makes the basic capabilities that don't have any bearing on what you should be doing in the competitive environment as lean as possible to fund the strategically important capabilities, the ones you actually want to do on a world-class level, because it will help you to compete in the ecosystem you're in. This leads to a basically entirely different financial structure of the firm, which we believe is far more enduring than a superficial change, either to drive revenue or to drive cost. What you see here is that, relatively speaking, you would spend more on the few capabilities that you deem strategically important to deliver your strategy, while you pay less, relatively speaking, in the ubiquitous capabilities and far less on the basic ones. So overall, you are more efficient, but also more geared towards driving growth in the future. This is what we kind of think is a sort of value acceleration, value creation that you should do in a market downturn, to be prepared to take advantage of an upturning market a couple of months down the road. So there.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. It was great to hear all of that interesting framework. I'm really excited to be here today with everybody. I'm also happy because I'm able to wear both of my hats today. I'm wearing my EIR hat of Progress Partners, and I'm wearing my senior advisor hat from OC&C Strategy Consultants. We have collaborated in the past on a few things, and it's really terrific for us to be able to do this today in this webinar. And I think what we want to do with this webinar today is really think about all the good things that we can make happen in this pivotal time. The whole theme of Progress right now is on this webinar series is business growth hacks, and we have some great people to talk about it today. We have Matt Fish, who's a partner at OC&C Strategy Consultants. We have Chris Legg, a senior managing director at Progress Partners. Clint Tasnett, the CEO of AdSwerve, which is actually an Abry Partners portfolio company. And speaking of Abry, we have Tyler Wick, who's a partner at Abry Partners. So what I'd like to do is for each one of you to just do a quick 1-minute introduction and tell the people in the audience, what's one business growth hack you've been working with or experimenting with at this time?
So super. I'm Matt with OC&C. Over at OC&C, I wear two hats. One is I'm the global head of B2B products and services, and the other would be private equity. All of our consultants, we try to, span between private equity and corporate work. I skew to about 80% private equity, and what I'm going to be talking about later is kind of some of the best of breed approaches that we're seeing from about a dozen funds as they shift from defense to offense with their portfolios.
But what's one business growth hack?
Well, so as we shift to offense, where I've been spending a lot of my time is with businesses that were either, buy and builds to begin with, or they didn't know that they were, and because of situations, a bit of resiliency, they are, either doubling down or optimistically becoming buy and build. Or for the ones that, that already were, they're trying to figure out how do they become in their small niche markets, and I typically work in small niche markets. How do they become the acquirer of choice and gain a little bit more intelligence on these firms that are on these companies that are more needed today than ever?
Okay, great. So Chris.
Chris Legg, nice to connect with everybody. I am a senior managing director at Progress Partners. I think most of you know Progress, but our core business is M&A. We work prominently with private companies on the sell side. We also help on the buy side. And the sort of message for this session is we are getting deals done. We actually have 3 scheduled to close in the month of June. That would be a good month anytime, but it's especially good in this environment. I'd say a couple of quick hacks from our side have been, Jerry Maguire, follow the money, or show me the money, follow the money. Like that has been, I think, a message for everybody. Just everybody shifted their corporate and personal spend, but there's still dollars moving around. And, we had a deal in travel. That's a deal we shelved. We also had a deal in media OTT. That's doing really well. Identity fintech. That's an interesting area that's done really well. E-commerce, parts of that have grown really well. We had one e-commerce company. It was growing 10 or 15%, and actually got into the mass business, and now they're growing 200%. So they're on everybody's radar. So that kind of following those paths and shifting your business accordingly, I think has been a big help. And I'll say the second part of that is you're just really proactively getting in touch with people. At the beginning, everybody was sort of this new world and sitting at home and had time on their schedules and weren't in airplanes. And we have been really encouraging everybody in our firm just to schedule calls with people. And I noticed in the last 2 weeks, even those calendars have gotten more crowded, but if people are happy to sort of connect with people and you never know what will come out of that.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Clint.
Oh, thank you, Marianne. Clint Tassett, founder and CEO of AdSwerve. We're one of Google's largest North American marketing data and analytics firms. And one of the hacks that we found is worked well is really just investing in our customers, right? And finding ways that through the current COVID environment that we can help to engage with those customers and advance their analytics position. So we've actually been doing a 3-part series that was recently even promoted by Google directly through all their social channels on ways that we can start to kind of even give out some of the, the process that we use as we go through an analytics launch process for our customers, give that out to people for free and allow them to really advance their knowledge, their practice, and invest in those customers to where as they grow both internally but also with AdSwerve and the relationship. And so we're finding that sometimes by giving away a little bit of something on the front end engages those customers and has opened up a lot of unique opportunities for more advanced positions as we move forward with those.
Always great to be on the giving side. Where can people find that if they're interested in learning more?
We have it on the website. There's going to be some of the events. So on adswerve.com, ADSWERVE. If for those that would love to learn how to do more advanced analytics or even get your basic chops, that's one of the ways that we can help to provide some insights and create a narrative around understanding a bit more around your consumer behavior around your own website.
Terrific. Thanks so much for that. And Tyler from Abry.
Thank you, Marianne. Abry Partners is a 32-year-old private equity firm based in Boston. We have one professional in London. We're managing a little over $5 billion in capital that we're actively investing. We're fortunate enough to have worked with Progress Partners and are an investor in Clint's company. So Clint's company is emblematic of the types of companies we like to invest in, which are founder-owned and operated companies who are looking for, to overuse a term, a value-added financial partner. In terms of business hacks, what we've been experimenting with or encouraging our companies to is, customers are under a tremendous amount of pressure to cut costs. So we've been encouraging our portfolio companies to trade off price in exchange for contract length. So it may be it's contract renewal time. You'd make your customer look like a hero if they got a 5-10% discount at renewal time during this environment. But in exchange, if you could extend the duration of your contract by a year or two, you'd look like a hero at the portfolio company. So that's what I got.
That's a great business growth hack. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so our first interview question goes to my colleague, Matt Fish. Matt, your partner, Sebastian, provided us with an interesting framework about how to create value. Can you you touched on it a little bit when we were talking earlier, but can you give us a little bit more concrete examples about how OC&C is helping their clients right now create value?
Great. Well, yeah, my esteemed colleague Sebastian, was quite fortunate that I think he was able to present, more of I would call it a framework that is proactive, highlighting some of the best of breed that we should be doing with our clients. I've had a little bit different approach or reality in the last 3 months, and I've frankly been more reactive. And what I mean by that is, I guess if we're in month 3, there's kind of been 3 stages to this crisis so far. At the beginning was just absolute triage, and a lot of private equity firms making decisions on what portfolios are we going to give up on. I happen to believe some have cut too close to the bone, but that's maybe a topic for another webinar. And then there were emergency initiatives. And we were called into a lot of work on the cost side. Yeah, that was great. We appreciate the ability to do that work with some of the portfolios that potentially we worked on at the early stage of the acquisition. However, about 3 weeks ago, it was very pronounced that we were entering a new stage, and you had a lot of GPs saying, more or less, I've just been through the hardest month or two of my life. You won't believe how hard I worked, and how frankly awful some of these tasks were. We're all resurfacing now and going on the offensive. Now there's a caveat there. A lot of the funds needed to somewhat restructure, shift to a more flexible type of funding. But once they got that in order, they've really shifted to again the offense of helping their portfolios grow as well as doing new deals. So we're encouraged to see that. And what I thought I'd share with you is some of the, and it's hard to say best of breed, but what we've been seeing that we like. And I say it's hard to quantify this as it's early stages in these growth initiatives, so grading it is tough. Hence, the criteria I applied to it was kind of, number one, analytically, when we help them with it, what has moved the dial in terms of at least scenario planning to the greatest degree. That'd be number one. And number two is what has been, I'd say, appreciated by the management that they're working with the most. And a bit of an aside there, and I don't know if this is representative. This is from about a dozen funds that we're working with now on these type of initiatives. It seemed like on the management appreciation side, the portfolio companies that have been the most kind of blown away with the assertiveness and ultimately the value that the funds are adding now are not the ones you think. They're not the private equity funds that have large operating teams and operating partners. They're the ones who have taken pretty smart deal teams and pivoted them to say, we're not Monday through Thursday looking for deals now. We're here to help you. And maybe that's unfair to the operating partner, but the operating partner kind of lives there anyways. And you thought that this person was going to really make some magic now, and maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But it's it is kind of a new approach, and it's being appreciated by the funds. Or by the portfolios. So what we're seeing, and I'll talk about these in terms of inorganic and organic, maybe spend a bit more time on inorganic, as I would guess, Chris, you're going to probably talk quite a bit about the M&A side, and I also kind of previewed some of that in my intro. So I think there's maybe 3 things we're being called on to do now, and I'll give some examples. The first would be a lot of pricing type of work, and I'll be honest with you, that's never quite been our focus, our bag. It's always been part of projects that we do. Now it's really become core. And there's just yesterday, we had done some work with a large auto service company, one of the largest. You've seen their ads in the US, they've got a catchy jingle. And although I said, for most of these initiatives, it's too early to grade them, this company is back to pre-COVID levels, in terms of their weekly revenue now, and they service cars. And I was just amazed to see this. And I look outside at my neighborhood, and there's not many cars driving around except for tree trimmers and landscapers and whatnot. And so I was wondering, how did they do this? And one of the key things was introducing kind of cleaning fees, COVID-related cleaning fees, onto every job that they do. These are appreciated by customers, and this is, while I would assume volume is probably back to about 60-70%, value, per job has gone up because of this. So that was kind of an interesting one that we've been seeing. Next is supply chain work. And a lot of the supply chain work we're doing, it's not just optimizing, as this has caused a lot of folks to consolidate their supply chain, but really bulletproofing. And I mentioned my 2 hats that I wear on B2B as well as private equity. I also spent 16 years of my career in Asia and China. So I'm probably getting a lot of calls on this, just this real concern of, I am scared to death that my resin supplier in China, or this or that supplier is going to, shut down. And we saw this before because obviously China went through it. How can I get some certainty that our supply chain is not going to be massively disrupted by this? So that's a piece of work that we've been doing quite a bit. And then the third one would be adjacencies. And I think it was Chris, you had mentioned a lot of the work you're doing on the deals or is with your portfolios is kind of following the money. Yeah, I think we're seeing the same thing here of adjacencies, really switching their product offering or switching, the type of client cohort that they're doubling down on. And we're working now with a logistics provider, a very niche logistics provider that works with sports teams and rock and roll bands and whatnot, a market that's totally dried up. And their ability to, number one, shift, these planes and different type of, logistics to, focusing on PPE and essential items, has been an absolute, it saved the day for them. And it's allowed them to start thinking about, how are we more diversified coming out of this? So we're seeing a lot there. One of the areas where we surely punch above our weight has been on in testing, TIC, testing, inspection, and certification. A lot of, real shifting there from, in food testing, from HoReCa, to CPG and whatnot. And an interesting fact there that we found out, I have kids coming in right now. Hey.
Actually,
Okay, 1 second. All right, buddy. Has been, we found that, for food testing, when you're testing for the supermarket or, retail, there's about 5 times as much spend, on that item as there would be if you're testing for HoReCa for restaurants, let's say. So that's been a bit of an eye opener for some of our customers there. So those were pricing, supply chain, and adjacencies. A lot of the inorganic, on the organic, maybe on the M&A side, because I think Chris will cover it. I covered it a bit, and I've got a customer here who needs me. What I kind of said before was a lot of the deals that were not buy and build have opportunistically found themselves as buy and build. And then a lot of the ones that have, really wanted to make sure they could project to the market and have intelligence so that, when people are going to be, looking for buyers coming out of this, potentially more than they were going into it, they are the acquirer of choice. So with that said, those were my, my few observations, my 2 cents. And given that customer A is here and my daughter's running the room now, I guess I'll cut it short. Although I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, Matt, I do have a question for you. And I also, speaking of landscapers, I have the folks outside right now also just mowing outside the window. Yeah. So we're sort of both in similar challenges. When you talk about following the money, one thing I was kind of intrigued about is, in the beginning, it was talking about kind of like, what are driving some of the M&A? And I'm not in the M&A world, but kind of thinking about what's driving a lot of your conversations recently. In the beginning, I think we talked about geo or product, or kind of what are the factors that maybe either buyers or sellers are kind of trending towards during the current current market? Is it that they're looking for expansion? Are they looking for product expansion or capability expansion? Is it just financially driven? Kind of curious what you're seeing kind of more recently.
I mean, hey, this is probably not a representative sample, but I think there's 2 things that we're seeing. The folks that are a bit more opportunistic, they're looking for deals and building scale, because they can. However, on, the ones that are being a bit more strategic and have wanted to do this for a while, it's been a bit more, focused on catchment zones. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'll do, will be, route density based services, and, they'll know they're really strong in the Southeast, but, have a few pockets where, they wanted to, call it the second half of, their hold period, start moving into gingerly. And now they're seeing, maybe this is an opportunity for us to collect the intelligence, understand who's out there, and start making some moves a few years ahead of, and a bit cheaper than they, had originally planned.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank
So
you.
I hope your daughter will be in good shape soon. So the perils of COVID, working from home.
Yeah, and by the way, I hope I handled that well. I remember seeing an interview with the consultant. I think he was in Seoul in South Korea, and his kids ran in, and he
Yeah.
flipped out and yelled. And I hope I was a little cooler than that.
No parental issues here. Tyler, obviously unprecedented times, but I always like to look on the bright side. How has this crisis helped you work with your portfolio companies to uncover new growth opportunities and creating value?
Thanks for asking. To Matt's point, we're very much in business. We have tons of capital to deploy, but at the moment, there's more opportunity to be helpful to portfolio companies than there is to look at new investment opportunities. So we've been working closely with our portfolio companies to really get back to basics. And by that, I mean, I think those of us in the audience who might have borrowed money, who have a capital structure that includes bank debt, we often produce financial statements that have adjustments in them, adjusted EBITDA, adjusted net income, et cetera. Now's the time to really step back and say, all right, what is the earnings power of our business? How much cash do we collect every month, and how much cash do we disperse? Because it's easy to get caught up and fool yourself that you're a more profitable business than you actually are. So what we've been doing is working with our portfolio companies on 13-week cash flow and really getting back to basics. And it's nitty-gritty, grimy work that nobody likes to do. But it's interesting when you step back and just pretend for a moment that US GAAP accounting didn't exist and you're just measuring things on a cash basis. It's really insightful to see how your business actually operates. So that's where we've been spending a lot of time, and that may not sound cheery, but quite frankly, it's been really illuminating for some of our companies. I know we have time constraints. I'm happy to get into other areas where we're spending time, whether it's M&A, but that's been the area where we're spending the most time.
Howard, have you found that the companies have been a lot more amenable to your help? I mean, my partner always says, take advantage of the crisis. And, when I was doing full-time private equity growth, they kind of listened to you, they kind of wouldn't. And yet, there's a real opportunity, I think, here to get in and be helpful to each other at a time everybody needs it.
We actually have found that. So what we remind our companies, it's kind of a pull relationship in that, even if we own a majority of a company, we're not asserting ourselves and forcing them to work with us. But in a case like an AdSwerve, where we're a minority owner, we've encouraged them to continue to, use our bench as a force multiplier, because we can take some burden off of our companies, because we do have people that are quite facile in their particular businesses and really good with Excel.
Yeah, when you think of PE, the growth, it's been a lot of these operating partners, and this must be a real time for them to shine and be helpful in a meaningful way.
We think so. And, what we really value is honest feedback, in that there may be some times where we think we're being helpful, and rather than an entrepreneur just being polite and saying, great, we'd love your help. If we don't need the help, if they don't need the help, please let us know, because we only want to be, welcome and helpful. We don't want to be a nuisance.
That's great. So I'm going to now ask one of your portfolio companies if you're just that.
Truth or dare?
Uh-oh.
No, thank you, Marianne. One of Sebastian, I really appreciate the lead in, because I feel like that really resonates with the way that we're approaching, the last several months within our business, as well as kind of really looking at it from a strategic, ubiquitous, and basic kind of concept model as well. And I think one of the things that we found is that alignment towards that strategic vision as we think about our competitiveness and against our how can we be ahead of our competition at the end of this, right? And thinking about what, if we have an advantage today, how do we lengthen that advantage tomorrow? And I think that strategic sort of vision and investment into that area really kind of showcases an opportunity on how you can actually leverage this as a place of being able to gain a bit of that distance, right? And so when we think about kind of where our strategic investment lies, we sort of put everything into a North Star of efficiency, right? Where we think as we think about our customer, we keep using the phrase kind of, you're going to have to do more with less. That period. Like as a business, that is going to be something we have to figure out and solve for. And so when we think about that strategic investment, technology clearly is one of those places that we feel we can advance. So the funny part is, to Tyler's point, our PE partnerships, things they love, data, right? Like to Tyler's example of we have a ton of folks that have great spreadsheet expertise. How can we help build that in for them to where they can give us those insights so we can ensure that we're focusing in the proper areas? So when I look at our investment, we look at it both internal and external, about 50-50 to be quite honest. So we're looking at internal. How can we build technology that produces both efficiencies to our teams? You know, what are ways that we can solve maybe practices that are being done in a more manual, model, and gain a way that we can help to produce, kind of less headcount, if you will. And what are ways that we can better understand our business and provide that, in a way that we can have our partners, run better analysis, or we can understand our business in real time. And that's been one of the best investments we've made internally, was building out a slew of dashboards instantly, right as we saw things starting to come affect market, especially within the marketing market, where we wanted to be able to literally understand day-to-day real-time analysis of how is our business performing, how is our customers' business being affected, where are we seeing opportunities, and how can we ensure that as we think about our sales strategies, we are aligning to opportunities that make sense for today, that might have changed, given yesterday's environment. So that's one of the things that we're doing internally. Externally, again, as we think about the concept, how can we create more with less? Again, a technology infrastructure investment, as we think about distancing ourselves, we're thinking about how do we connect with our customer in a way that creates more, more engagement, but at more efficiency. Meaning, how can I talk to our customer? How can they, work with us as a practice? And how can they do so in a way that maybe is less, again, we want to stay human connected, but we also want to create transparency, right? Transparency around the work that we're doing, transparency within the communication strategies that we have with our customer. And so we've built out a platform essentially. Unfortunately, we had started that process before COVID had come around, but it really just almost exemplified why it was even that much more important to our customer relationship, was why this engagement platform that really showcases everything from the contracts that we have with our customers, the billings that we have with our customers, as well as any sort of, tickets or SOW kind of, kind of utilization of where we're at. That has really opened up a way for our customer to become more efficient with the way that we're sort of delivering our product to them, in the ways that they're engaging back with our account management team and with different strategies within our company. So efficiency is kind of, again, the name of the game when it comes to how we feel that given the current market conditions, that we can help to, advance, a lot of the relationships with our customers.
Well, Clint, if I may ask, and this question frankly may kind of be rooted in a, old school way of looking at things, and you may not look at the world like this, but, as you talked about your customers wanting to do more with less, and hey, we're seeing that too when we're investing in our customers and doing projects, in a different way than we would before. But how proactive have you guys, or transparent have you been with that in your customers? And what I mean by that, and what, maybe will, be looked at as being a bit old school, is, you want to make sure you're not bargaining against yourself in a way, to saying, hey, we will do more with less. How have you kind of navigated that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we've taken, that's a great question, Matt. We haven't taken a public position with our customer to say, hey, we're going to be guaranteeing you more for less cost. I think it's more of a reactive sort of message to them, and really sort of having these things as added benefits. So as we talked about in the beginning of this, investing in our customers, right? It's more of a reaction saying, hey, there's now this added value. We're not touting it. We're not saying it's more at the front end of it. We're saying, here are things that we're going to give you. without any sort of request from them, right? So it's really kind of us reacting to the market conditions and saying, here's added value that we're going to deliver. Here's added training. Here's an infrastructure we're going to build. So here's a new connective layer that we're going to have for you to communicate or create transparency with the relationship you may have with AdSwerve. And so really what we want is not so much to go to the customer at the end of the day and say, look at us and all of this added things that we're doing. Let me rephrase that. Not going to the customer saying, hey, look, we're going to guarantee you more. We'd rather the customer looks back and says, wow, look at how much more AdSwerve has given us in recent times, or how much more investment we feel like we're getting out of AdSwerve as a reaction to, the current kind of economics.
Yeah, and I would assume as much as you are, monitoring, your customer feedback, you're also spending a lot of time looking at, the competitive landscape and what they're offering up.
Exactly, and that's when we think about that, as Sebastian mentions, that kind of strategic distancing. I think that's the differentiator that we're trying to make sure that we evaluate with our competitors, is using this time to sort of heavily invest in that front end of the infrastructure, heavily invest in that strategy and that vision that we can start to take. Because one of the things we find in our business is the more we invest and create the questions to our customers, the more opportunity that starts to generate from a working perspective or an opportunity perspective. So it's the more engagement creates more questions create more opportunity. And that's basically what we're trying to build is platforms that create transparency, but also create that question that advances their marketing or digital maturity within their organization.
So we're feeling positive about the future, right?
That we are.
Okay, good. So Chris, I'd like to move on and talk to you about how you're looking at the market right now, both on the buy and sell side, and what are some of the inorganic opportunities for businesses to be growing?
Sure, and we're definitely feeling positive, as I mentioned in my intro comments. Going to have one of our best months ever in June for closes, and why is that, and why are we feeling positive about the environment? At the end of the day, we're professional deal makers at Progress Partners, and our job is to connect buyers and sellers in a kind of value-added way. And there's just a lot of noise in the market in any given day, and it's our job to cut through that. Well, there's sort of a lot of macro noise, of course, in this uncertain environment. But I would say one kind of nice outcome of all this from an M&A perspective is the lists of buyers of sellers have sort of gone down. I mentioned before, like follow the money. There's a bunch of businesses that just won't be able to transact in this environment because they're in the wrong side. It doesn't mean, by the way, if you're falling off a cliff, you still can't sell, but it's more challenging. And then there's a bunch of buyers who just, for reasons of the board or the CEO, or there's too much negativity in their business, are just out of buying right now. So, for the universe is shrunken, and that makes, I think, it easier for all of us. So that's kind of one macro point. I'll separate my second and third points into sort of buy side and sell side in terms of M&A. It's intuitive that in a down market like this, it's opportunistic on the buy side. It's good. That being said, as I said before, the challenge is a lot of these strategic acquirers, or even, you heard Tyler say earlier on, like a lot of their focus has been internal on their existing portfolio. We've had a lot of PE discussions where they're saying, we're all focused on triaging our portfolio, or corporate to sort of shut down. But there are those who are acquiring, and there's been a bunch of studies that have really been widely circulated the last couple of weeks about, you talked about data earlier on, Matt, like from the previous downturns, deals done in these kind of bottom of cycle versus deals done, not in the bottom of cycle, have done far better. And you can measure that in different metrics, but it's literally, multiples better in terms of the outcome of those deals over years. So why is that from the buy side? If you're out buying now, like why would the deals you acquire have done better? There's kind of two reasons. One is it goes without saying that valuations are down. I mean, on average, I think in the private market they're down about 30%. It varies a lot by sector. But I think the more important point, and this gets back to sort of the point I was saying I wanted to take advantage of the crisis, is that if you think of that, most of the deal is made on kind of working it afterwards, the integration, the value add, all the stuff that everyone here on this panel has spoken about. There's nothing like a crisis to come in and really be a great change agent and helpful to these businesses. If you think about it, I can think of this real time now where, you want to move your business or the business you acquired, 10 yards or 20 yards, to use a football analogy, like you can move it 50 yards now because, if you talk to person X and you say, hey, you used to report to Ruth and now you're reporting to John and your budget's been cut 50%. Are you okay with that? And they're like, do I still have a job? Yeah. Okay, great. I love that. Thank you. So, I mean, it sounds trite, but it's a great advantage to really take advantage of change in the businesses you're acquiring and really move the needle in ways that probably was a little more sticky and challenging before. So valuations kind of able to change really helps on the buy side. On the sell side, I'd say, and Tower kind of referenced this in his comments, the idea of EBITDA adjustments or any kind of adjustments, I think have gotten more normalized in the buy-sell universe, if you will. And, there's definitely a kind of COVID adjustment in every business we do. And how would this business look? If you think about it in some level, you're going to get a mulligan, to use a golf analogy, for 2020, just about any level. If you're doing good, you're doing medium, you're doing bad, you're going to get kind of a freebie. So it's all about everyone's shooting right now for 2021. And what is my business going to look like for that? And so, if you can show credible path to how that could be, so this kind of COVID adjusted, there was one business we were selling where things were clearly down 50%, and we still actually had a bidding frenzy and got the final bid up 30% over the initial bid, even though the business was down 50%. But we were able to extrapolate some trends, to Matt's point about the different chapters of the last 3 months, that in fact in the last 4 or 5 weeks, a couple of key KPIs had really increased. And so just pulling out sort of, the metrics to show, because everybody on the buy side doesn't want to buy a falling knife. And so if you can just show that, yes, this business is sustainable, it's going to grow, it's growing now in certain metrics, and look how it's going to be in 2021, I think that helps a lot. And so those are deals we've been getting done. Again, some of them have been growing in this environment, but others haven't. And if you can just show kind of a clear path to what it could look like in a more normal environment, which we'll get to at some point over the next couple of quarters here, that's really
Chris, just a question. I'm going to oversimplify and say there are 2 types of companies. One type is you need outside financing or financial support to make it through COVID. The other type is you're stable on your own and you're not going to want to pick your head up and explore a sale because valuations are down by 30%. So the way I look at the world is with a great deal of skepticism over the next 4 quarters, i.e. those companies that are going to market, there must be something wrong with them if they're willing to sell now with valuations depressed and so much uncertainty. So I'm going to throw that ball back to you and get your perspective on that.
Sure. So we had a site we were just about to sign up before the downturn, and they punted for exact reason, which is, yeah, we know, and their business is doing fine, if not slightly up from this downturn. But we just don't want to deal at 30% less, to my point earlier on. I think what you're referencing in this environment. I mean, that being said, we were working with a company last week where I think this goes against your point. A private company, they had an unbound, unsolicited inbound from a public company. And so, that they weren't selling themselves, but it also shows people are stepping up in this environment. And I would guess I'd refute the point that just because whether you're getting an inbound over the transom or you're putting yourself up, the valuation I think is one issue. But again, there's other reasons to sell, and sometimes to your point, like you were going to sell anyways, and I think there's still deals to be done in this environment. And there's businesses that are certainly not getting whacked. I guess from a valuation perspective, to my point earlier on about showing a credible path.
Yeah.
Answer your question.
Yeah, that's certainly responsive. Thank you.
Clint, we have a question for you from the audience. What are some of the functionalities from the real-time data analytics umbrella that you think are vital at this time? For example, pricing analytics, demand forecasting, et cetera. Do you see some new functionalities that might arise from in the new normal?
No, that's a great question. So one of the places we've been focusing in with some of our clients is really more around from an attribution perspective. So thinking about, companies are really looking at, especially from a marketing perspective, what is my ROI, and making sure we truly understand $1 in, what am I getting, out, right? And so what we're seeing is a lot of companies really trying to take a more, a deeper approach. I think in many places their marketing dollars have been invested in silos. And as we get into the future with the cookieless world, it's becoming more and more challenging to truly understand, how is that dollar being interpreted, and how do we make sure that, that dollar is being utilized to the best of its ability. And so I think that's one of the things that we're sort of seeing customers really having to tighten the screws on is really understanding each of those different silos, while maybe not completely interconnected or will ever be, but being able to truly kind of scrutinize. And I'll give you an example. Is we had a customer recently who in many cases we look at like lower funnel, right? We look at things like search, we look at things like remarketing campaigns, and we tend to think these opportunities might be some of the strongest drivers to a lot of the, again, the attribution or the conversions that we're seeing, across our business. And one of the things that was interesting around one of our customers is we actually took a pretty deep analysis only to find out that their remarketing campaigns were really just the same people over and over again. So the agency that was driving all of this value to their customer, in reality, we shut it off. It made zero difference to the actual business. On the inverse side, as a trend, what we've actually seen is a lot of companies taking a more increased position on their search strategy. Again, so, we think about that lower funnel strategy in a way that we can make sure from an analytics perspective to capture what is the true, kind of business value that we're seeing. That's some of what we're trying to help make sure our customers are better understanding. As I think to the future, what's the new normal? I mean, companies that we're engaging with are really wanting to understand more from their customer, right? What does that customer journey look like? So I think the future is where I think today has been more, looking at unique companies that want to get and invest in places to think about, propensity modeling, lifetime value, churn analysis. I think that's kind of advanced company practices, to be quite honest, because it takes a lot of multi-departmental, multi-divisional alignment in order to make some of that type of analysis possible. I think the future is that, companies are going to have to standardize that a bit more as their practice and in order to get to some of that questioning, mainly because, again, a lot of that investment is going to be reduced. And so when we talk about more with less, internally, companies are going to have to align themselves to answer those questions to gain efficiencies, to allow for those types of questions, those types of practices to be possible.
Thanks so much, Clint. Okay, so we're coming to the close here. So I'm just going to ask you all to just give me one quick, no more than 5-10 words answer to this. When you think about 2021, are you feeling positive, or are you feeling cautious, or are you feeling negative?
I would say I'm very positive at 21. You've heard me talk about current. I'm very skittish around Q3 and Q4, but very positive on 21.
Okay.
I feel the same way. I would just say that we all have to persist and endure through the balance of this year. But if you track what's happening with the COVID numbers, things are improving fairly significantly. There are some hot spots, of course, in certain states in America, but I'm optimistic that we'll be through this and 2021 will be a wonderful rebound.
As an entrepreneur, I wake up optimistic. That's my DNA. I can't help otherwise.
Sebastian?
Very optimistic for 21. Not so optimistic for Q3. I think it will be quite slow this year, but very optimistic for 21.
And Matt, you want to close us out?
As an objective, or what some folks may call cynical consultant, I am, although I think this year is going to be bloody and I am somewhat scared for the next few months, I do find it extremely exciting for us and the companies we work with to position themselves for when the, let's say, pace car ultimately pulls off the track.
Well, let's keep it positive. Thanks for coming today.